Good afternoon, all. You're just all being let into the waiting room now. Thanks for attending. For the most part today, the cameras and the mics are going to be off because we're expecting a significant amount of people to be joining. I mean, there's already over 200 here now, and we're expecting probably almost double that. So just for speed and for ease and to not have to turn microphones off and cameras off at different times, the communications will be off at the moment. There may be time later where we can invite people in to chat if needed, but for the most part it'll be us talking, but I'll go through that shortly. I'm going to give everybody another a couple of minutes just to join the meeting, and then we'll kick off. We'll do some introductions and kick off. Just to those of you who've just joined, we're just letting everybody in through the lobby. It's taken a little while. There's currently over 300 people on here, so everybody's muted and the camera's off. We're going to look to get started in a couple of minutes' time. I'll just get everybody through the lobby. Thanks. I've also managed to put a headset on, so if somebody who was asking whether there was an echo, I've put this on, so hopefully that'll be better. Right, it's 3:05, so I'm going to get on because obviously we've got a lot to get through today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen because we've got a little presentation. So let's try that. Can people on the panel, can you see the screen okay? Great. Okay, yeah, everybody welcome. There will be some more join in, so if you see the numbers start to tot up, then we'll add them in as they come along, but for timings we just get going. Welcome to today's Home Energy Model Roundtable with Quidos. This session is due to take around 1.5 hours. The first hour of which is going to be made up of information on the home energy model and the future home standard. And then the last half an hour we're going to leave to questions and answers from everybody which is in the group. So the agenda for today is essentially we'll do a bit of an introduction shortly, and then we'll do some scene setting on energy performance and net zero in the UK. We'll then have a small introduction to Quidos in our role in the HEM rollout, the home energy model rollout, before going into an overview of HEM, the future home standard, a bit on existing buildings and also on EPCs, and then we'll finish off with transitioning from SAP to HEM, and then the quality, the question and answer and the open discussion which we've spoken about. So, with that being the case, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to introduce the myself and then the panel members. And then we'll get into the crux of today's presentation. So my name is Billy Say. I'm the scheme manager at Quidos, responsible for essentially ensuring the quality and competency of our assessors and the work that our assessors carry out. I've been here for almost 10 years, and have largely been involved in the existing building side of things, but I'm aware of all of the changes in SAP and HEM going forward. So that's me in this role. Today, what I'll be doing is basically chairing this roundtable. The crux of this meeting will be dealt with by my colleagues who you'll see their faces on the screen, hopefully. So let me start with introducing Chris Barrington. Chris, can you introduce yourself and a little bit of how you're involved in the HEM rollout and future home standard?
That's it. Hi all, I'm Chris Barrington. I'm the CTO here over at Quidos. I've also got a terrible cold, so I apologise for that in advance. Been involved in EPCs since its rollout in 2007, so that is a very long time. And more recently, we've been involved in HEM, and we are part of the consortium for writing the HEM engine as well. So that's the core engine, not any of the wrappers that go around it. That's me. Over to you, David.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Jones. I am the Energy Calculation Lead at Quidos. I've been at Quidos for just over 10 years now. And during my time at Quidos, I hired someone called Billy, who is now leading this presentation, and I shifted over onto the energy side. So I wrote our SAP 10.2 and RDSAP calculation engines, got them all approved through BRE. And that's me. And now on to John.
Thanks, David. Yes, I'm John Ponting. I'm the outlier here from not being from Quidos. I'm from the company AES. For those who aren't familiar with us, we do SAP calculations, SBEM, BREEAM, air testing, all of everything that kind of encapsulates energy performance of buildings. For me personally, I've been involved with SAP and SBEM pretty much the same time as Chris, really, around 2007 time, mostly on the new build side. And what I'm doing now, my current role at AES is kind of crystal ball gazing to look into the future home standard, unpick HEM or what we know of it today, and also support the likes of DESNZ, government departments in terms of beta testing and bug finding for the software that they're currently developing. Also, I created the HEMline blog, which will hopefully be used to answer some questions about just how to use HEM and what the new inputs are, which you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place to find me. That's my plug done. I'll hand back to Billy.
Brilliant, thanks, John. Yeah, John's our very special guest today. I'm not sure we announced that on the agenda, but he's here because we like to call him in-house the HEM expert, the one who knows all about HEM and picks up the bugs and like as they come through. So thanks for joining us, John.
Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah. I'm going to pass across to David, who is going to take most of this presentation now. Throughout, I will jump in where necessary, David, and ask some questions. For those of you on the call, the question and answer section should be available. And if I can ask you to start making use of that question and answer section, usually the first question which is answered is, will the slides be provided? Yes, the slides will be provided, and yes, you'll get a CPD certificate for attending today's session. So yes, if we can refrain from using the chat for questions and make use of the question and answer section, that'll be much appreciated, and I'll be going through them gradually and including them in the discussion as we go along. So with that being the case, David, over to you.
Thank you, Billy. Let's just skip over one slide. Oh, we've lost Billy. No.
Can you see that okay, David?
I can still see setting the scene.
We're still on the first slide. You kind of cut out for a second.
Okay, bear with me 2 seconds. Because that's not the slide that I'm on. Any better?
Nope.
Okay, bear with. I'll stop.
At this point, I'll blame Teams. I said, shouldn't use Teams.
Well, to keep people entertained, then this is my Christmas jumper of choice today, which is a T-Rex eating Rudolph. So happy Christmas, everybody.
Yeah. That's really good.
It was either this or Nightmare Before Christmas. That's the only 2 Christmas jumpers I own, and the other one is very hot. So. Getting a lot of love for the Christmas jumper.
Yeah, a lot of love in the Christmas. We should all have just worn Christmas jumpers. It would have made everything go a lot smoother.
David, do you know the content of the next slide? Can we test your memory on this?
Thankfully, I don't need to be tested because I have my own version on a separate screen.
I wonder if you could share. I think Bill's
Yeah,
gone.
we've lost Billy.
And, yeah. So you could just, if you want, you could just risk it, share your screen, and then just crack on.
Okay, let us see if I can do this then.
Yeah, got you.
Okay.
We've got your team screen. There it is.
Yay. Yay.
Okay, so yes, okay, so setting the scene, we're going to be looking at energy performance in the UK and our push to net zero. So it's not an underestimate to say that human-induced climate change is a reality that we're all experiencing. Floods, extreme weather conditions, winds, rains, storm, loads of heat over the summer. This has all been contributed to by human activity, and there is very little denying that carbon is one of the dominating factors in greenhouse gases that's the cause of climate change. A report from DESNZ of their energy emissions from 2022 showed that residential buildings account for 20% of greenhouse gas emissions in the UK. The Climate Change Committee has stated that the UK will not meet its emissions targets without near or complete decarbonisation of our housing stock, and that's from a 2019 report called UK Housing Fit for the Future. So how are we doing that? How are we measuring our impact, and how are we reducing it? So since 2008 and the introduction, since the introduction of home information packs back in 2007, we saw the introduction of energy performance certificates. This also helped us meet obligations under the EU Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. So for domestic dwellings, an energy cost rating was used as an energy performance metric. We'll discuss a little bit later the impact of that decision for using cost. Since 1994, building regulations required that energy rating metric be used for building regulation compliance, and that has brought us the standard assessment procedure. So SAP has its origins back in 1993 when it was first published by BRE, the Building Research Establishment for the Department of the Environment as it was then, now been superseded by DESNZ. And SAP itself has its roots in a much older model, the BRE domestic energy model, that was first produced in 1985, the year I was born. building regulations compliance is now linked to carbon and energy. So we have a dwellings emission rate, a dwelling primary energy rate, and a dwelling fabric efficiency. And all of those are compared against a specific target rate that's set by a notional dwelling, which has the minimum fabric and HVAC requirements from building regulations. So SAP is now 30 years old, and at its core even older, nearly just over 40 years old, and that in itself has produced a number of issues from the output that we get to it. So many have said that the output is a broad brush approach to recording energy performance. We only have a single measure, and considering the breadth and nuance of energy and environmental policy, is that broad brush or very blunt tool still appropriate? We also have many misconceptions about the output, whether that be because of the occupancy assumptions that are being made or various other assumptions that are made by the calculation methodology, and that has led to a lot of misconceptions about EPCs and how they're calculated coming through. There are the obvious accuracy issues. Everything is done by a person, and people, whilst we strive to ensure that assessors are doing the same things for the same circumstances with conventions, we can't necessarily guarantee that, and that can have a knock-on impact for the rating that we finally get. And we also have technological changes. When SAP was first produced, heat pumps were not something that were widely used in domestic settings. As we move forward, heat pumps are going to be the space heating de jour that we're going to be looking for in domestic dwellings. So having a calculation methodology that doesn't best reflect those technological changes, as we have seen, PV batteries, diverters, heat batteries, lots of brand new technologies and intricate ways of calculating are trying to be hung onto this very old model that's creaking under the pressure of it. So now we get to here, 2025, we're at a line in the sand, a nexus point where we want to be able to move forward in how we represent energy performance in our dwellings, but we're being held back somewhat by the approaches that we use to do that. And that's why we're here at this point with a brand new methodology, brand new in so far as up until about 6 months ago it was still called SAP 11, but the consultation that the government put through said let's draw a line in the sand for SAP, and we have a brand new calculation methodology that is going to be the home energy model. So that has hopefully set the scene.
So, David, just before we get into that, then,
yeah,
just for our first stopping point on, so we know that a change is happening, and we're going to talk shortly about some of those changes. I'd like to get the opinions of those yourself, but also John and Chris on supporting the change. Are we fully supportive of the change and the need for a new methodology? And if so, or if not, why? If we start, David, with you, and then we'll move on to John and Chris.
Yeah, I think we've certainly reached the technical capacity that SAP has demanded, and to be able to move forward and calculate the intricacies of how dwellings are currently used and how they will be used over the next decade, we need something new. It's not to say that HEM is perfect or imperfect. We need to draw the line and look at other ways of doing things, and that's what this point brings us to.
Yeah, I'd agree on that. Yeah, I know there can be a lot of caution when the government says, right, we're getting rid of this thing we've used for 30 years and we're going to start using this. But when you start looking into the home energy model, that there are so many similarities between HEM and SAP just in terms of usability. But it just comes with all these extra added benefits of not being the one trick horse that SAP is, because you can only use SAP for Part L or doing assessments and EPCs and nothing else. Whereas the idea behind HEM is that it opens up, it kicks down all of those walls that are surrounding SAP. And when you want to use SAP for something and it just doesn't work, or it's not designed to, HEM should be able to give us all those extra answers to those questions that we would love to be able to answer for clients. You can tell I'm being real much of an advocate for HEM. I am very excited about it. Is it going to be a nice smooth transition? That could be another question, but hopefully everything's going to align, and HEM is going to do what we believe it's going to do.
Brilliant. And Chris, do you have anything to add to those two very helpful responses?
Yeah, moving away from the technology side, it's really sort of policy, and more policy. The government has tried to fit the one engine, which sort of like is a cost-based model rather than the carbon-based model, into various policies over the last 30 years. And that's really where it's creeping at the seam. If we were still just using it for EPCs, I'd say SAP would be fine. But it's lining up all the new policies that they want to do with carbon reduction and then having the appropriate metrics to measure them. I think we've all sort of seen with MEES, you need to have a C or a D or whatever it's going to be to rent your house out, but it's not an ideal metric, and it's also very much a cliff edge as well. So that kind of thing lends itself to sort of like people trying to push things over the line and making sure they get a C or a D. HEM changes that. I think the only one note of caution I would sound is that I can see it that for each policy or major policy that comes out, there will be a new wrapper, and what we might find is a multitude of similar softwares all trying to support these various wrappers for policy. So in some ways we've had it nice, certainly ourselves as accreditation body, although we've had to write the engine and the UI, and it sounds like our lives might be easier because we're doing away with the engine part. My guess is we're going to be writing a lot of UIs. There's going to be a lot more UI work and software work. Policies are going to come and go quickly. Metrics are going to come and go more quickly. And again, I slightly worry about, again, it's not maybe the accuracy, but the, making sure that the metrics are appropriate, and then and that validation for all those metrics in possibly quite a quick turnover. SAP is very solid. It's been going for 30 years. We know what it's doing. We might find the rate of change and pace of change over the next few years a lot more, even though we've got a single engine.
Yeah, we'll definitely come on to the single engine part of that, Chris. Don't give away the spoilers just yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just to add, yes, HEM's great, and changes to EPCs are fantastic to prevent some of these output issues. But again, it was a decision made back in the sands of time to use for EPCs to show a single cost-based metric when gas was very cheap. Therefore, it was quite it was easier for people to anticipate if your rating was poor, it was because your house cost you a lot to heat. That's not to say that we couldn't have changed those metrics in the meantime. Whilst the final output is cost-based, everything else that the SAP actually does is energy based. So you have a delivered energy output, you multiply that by the cost, by the unit price of the fuels being used to get the cost, you multiply it by the carbon factors to get the old EIR that was on the EPC, and you multiply it by primary energy factor to get the primary energy figures. So if there was the impetus previously to make changes, I think SAP could have adapted to displaying a multitude of metrics, but there was never that government impetus. And we are at this nexus tipping point where everything kind of has to change for the future. It would have nice to have seen some of those improvements come along earlier to prevent sort of like this cliff edge of rating decisions.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. I'll just so we can move on from that one, let you move on to actually giving some of the details. I'll just take 2 minutes of your time just to introduce Quidos. David, if you go to the next slide. Quidos as originally started out about 20 years ago as an accreditation scheme, and throughout the years we've grown that accreditation scheme to offer accreditation for almost all strands of assessment, and now much more into the retrofit side of things as well. About around 2 years ago, Quidos were bought out, and in that time we've essentially aim to build our offering as a company. We've been able to dip our toes into all areas of the market, from software to accreditation to consultancy and the likes, and that's where we are with how that links is because, like David mentioned previously, we are involved in the group of people who are writing the core engine. I'm not going to focus too much on this for now because I want to get into it and I'm conscious of time. So David, you can pass through that bit.
Yep, sure. So yeah, just a brief overview. In 2025, DESNZ released an open tender for the delivery of energy performance calculation technologies. Chris touched on it that we teamed up with a company called Systenic to bid for the delivery and maintenance of the home energy model core engine. We'll discuss what the difference is between core and the wrappers shortly. Systenic have a lot of experience when it comes to energy performance. A lot of their staff are former BRE staff who have tons of SAP experience, so understand the methodologies involved like the back of their hand, and we were successful. Hurrah! Congratulations to us. Pat on the back. We are currently focusing on the current focus of the implementation at the moment for HEM core is new build calculations. Work is currently ongoing for the inclusion of older technologies. I will touch on some examples of that as we go through this group. So yeah, look out for that. But yeah, HEM is something that we're really proud to be involved in, and hopefully we'll be able to deliver something that is fit for the future. Oh, I shall continue talking. So now we're going to move on to an overview of the home energy model itself. So we'll talk about what the home energy model is. We'll discuss the primary wrappers that are being discussed. So the home energy model is the name for our new calculation methodology for the calculation of energy performance in domestic dwellings. It is rooted in international standards, so ISO 52016, which deals with energy performance in buildings, and these form the sort of basis of how the calculations are done. We've been looking at the up-to-date standards on how boiler efficiency should be calculated, and for heat losses. So we're making sure that this is as up-to-date as we can be. So HEM has been conceived as a modular package. So it has a core calculation and that is run against or called to run by a variety of function-specific output wrappers. So the core calculation, as John hinted earlier, is very much like SAP. So it has a heat loss model, water and space heating demand models, and then the energy requirements to meet all of those demands, factoring in on-site generation as well as storage. And it's from the function-specific wrappers that requests for in-depth modeling are made. So the wrappers set up the parameters to which the calculation follows. And on this slide, I have, I won't say stolen, I've borrowed a slide that should hopefully demonstrate how this modular nature of HEM works. So the wrapper takes the data inputs from assessment, it standardizes them and contextualizes them, and then sends that data to the core engine for calculation. It then the data is received back by the wrapper as a result and may do some additional post-processing. So one example of how this sort of like difference between the wrapper and the core work is something that I've been dealing with in the last couple of weeks for our HEM work. So the appliance gains that are used in the calculation, things like cooking and lighting, the gains that are calculated are based on the occupancy assumptions that we use for the calculation, and those assumptions, like the number of dwellings, the number of cooking events, those are all part of the wrapper. So it's the wrapper that does those calculations, and it's the impact of those gains that are passed into the core to do a simulation for the calculation. So the work that I've been looking at is how the heat losses from twin burner range cookers should be modelled. Will it be done in the core, or should the gains from the losses be part of the wrapper level, because that's the occupancy level? So it's been a really interesting way to see how and where the dividing line between occupancy and actual core mathematics draws the line. But that's in practice how the wrapper to the core and then output should be working. Part of the complexity of HEM comes from its ability to increase the resolution of modelling from monthly averages down to half-hourly simulation. So the calculation resolution is defined by the wrapper and can go down to the half hour, which would increase the number of calculation iterations from 12, which we currently have in SAP, one for each month, to 17,520, which is a 145,900% increase. So it does a lot more. This increased level of accuracy should increase the overall level of accuracy within the model, and mean that future uses of the data, such as digital twinning, should have a greater relationship to the real world data. It would also allow the model in future to interact directly with smart meter data, because they're recorded at the same time step. In addition to the modeling changes, there is a brand new product database that's being completely overhauled from what we currently have to better reflect things like heat pumps. All systems, including those that were previous SAP defaults, will be included in the database. So you won't have to select a SAP default or something from the database. All of the defaults will appear as models from that data set. And there'll also be different levels of default system depending on the calculation type that's being done. So if you're doing an as designed FHS model, you might use a slightly less conservative assumption, whereas if you don't have it for an existing build, for example, you might use a more conservative one, just to give that worst case scenario. The database itself does include proprietary testing data, which means that only a redacted version is being made publicly available. And finally, the biggest change that we'll see is that there will no longer be a written specification to go with the wrappers or the core. There is a code base written in the Python programming language that will be open source and available to download. You can read it. You could even run it yourself if you wanted to. With the code base already being there, that means that schemes and software developers no longer have to develop their own calculation engines and have them checked, tested against all the test cases, and then approved. So it should speed up any improvements that need to be made to the original methodology. The team that run the register at MHCLG will be hosting a single official calculation engine, something that Chris touched on, and this will be accessed through schemes through a process called ECAS, so Energy Calculation as a Service. Quidos have been working with this type of model for years, so software providers can access our approved calculation engines through API calls using XML data, and that's exactly what ECAS is going to be doing. It will provide a single source of truth for calculations made through HEM and its wrappers, and ECAS itself will also host an unredacted version of the product database and add those details when it does a calculation. So that is the core part of the home energy model. Let's look at the future home standard wrapper, which is John's particular area of expertise. I haven't written too much on this, but this will be the calculation wrapper for new building regulations compliance. It will contain all the updated details of the notional building that will be part of the future home standard itself, and will have greater data collection requirements. We're looking, it could be up to 4 times more data being collected than SAP. So I suppose at this point, John, what can we talk about when it comes to what data OCDEAs or architects are going to be collecting and inputting into HEM FHS?
Sure. Thanks. Yeah. Before I answer that, I'll just go back over the slides that you've just gone through there, because it is really crucial for assessors, whether they're OCDA or DEA, to understand the theory of HEM and how it is completely different to SAP. But at the end of the day, it's down to the software developers to produce something that is familiar, asking the questions in a very similar order to SAP, reports to look familiar, because Joe Public just wants their bit of paperwork at the end of the day. So although there's all this stuff happening behind the scenes, which is ridiculously complex and difficult and different to what we're used to, we are aiming for making the software and the interfaces and the apps streamlined, quite similar to SAP. Yeah, there'll be different questions in there, but just want to ease any panic in the room that you don't have to learn all about the HEM engine. You don't need to learn Python. You know, it's not going to be that scary. Yeah, going on back to what going back to the actual question just about the future home standard. There, as I mentioned previously, there are a lot of similarities between what SAP is asking for and what is going to be in the future home standard wrapper. There are a few areas which are going to be a bit different. So one of them is around ventilation. The latest version, we're having to enter trickle vents into windows for new builds, which obviously you don't need to do in SAP. Obstacles or surroundings is going to be very different. So at the moment in SAP, you have a sheltered side 1, 2, 3, 4 option, whereas what they're proposing is we'll need to put in the distance and height of every house in the surroundings, which the big issue for me, because we work with national builders and we quite often replicate house designs, that takes away a lot of the replication, because no 2 houses will have the same obstructions around them. So that's something I need to keep an eye on. And the third thing that's a bit different is going to be pipe work, which again is something you don't have to worry about in SAP, but in the FHS wrapper, they're talking about what is the pipework length of the hot water from the bath to the cylinder, from around the heating loops, what's the heating pipework. So those are things which I'm keeping an eye on. We have to bear in mind that HEM is, or the future HEM's wrapper is still being revised to some degree. So, and there is simplification going on. So quite, I know we said 4 times as much on that slide. I feel like that would be the worst case scenario, and I'm hoping there'll be some simplification, particularly in these areas which are brand new, which SAP doesn't deal with, because as I say, we just want to be, we want to make this as easy as possible to complete the assessments. Because if it's longer to assess, then the cost goes up, doesn't it? And that's no good for anybody. So we need to find that line balancing between accuracy and not putting ourselves out of business. You know, the 2 extremities. I probably over-answered your question there, David.
No, that was fantastic, and you're right about the extent to which they're bringing in lots more simplification. I believe that I seem to remember that it was a multi-zonal design for FHS when the original consultation came out, and now they've simplified it to, is it just a single zone or a habitable and a non-habitable now?
Yes, the latest version is just a single zone, whereas the consultation was 2-zone. Now, Wales and Scotland still haven't dropped down to 1 zone yet, but that's probably a question for another day. Certainly the Future Home Standard in England, the last version I saw was a single zone model. Whereas if you were doing like the pure full fat hem, you could in theory measure each room separately and get it to run the calculation to that level of degree. So that's a good example of simplification, because measuring a house compared to measuring each zone individually like you would do in an SBEM, that's obviously going to condense your timescale down for modelling.
Yeah. David, I have a question on that. So one of the things which was mentioned, I think either David or John, was about streamlining software and making sure software was easily, readily available and intuitive for members. And I think, David, you also mentioned how ECAS being a central place for the engine. Chris, perhaps you could jump in on this, on like how the ECAS API integration is going to affect things or impact scheme providers, assessors, and those in the industry.
That's a good question. I mean, ECAS, as in energy calculation as a service, will remain hidden behind the scenes. So we won't see it directly, or say the assessors won't see it directly. Then what they will see is the interface, the user interface from all the different schemes that want to sort of like, will produce software that will go into the government engine. So between schemes, we'll have differences. And I think we'll possibly start to see bigger differences between schemes UI at the moment. So at the moment, in case you're not aware, so all of it, whether it's CoreLogic or Elmhurst or ourselves, we all have to go through approval. So we all go through the same approval process, and that used to be a very heavy touch on how the screens were laid out. It appears, I would say, as a suggestion, that's going to get lighter with time, but certainly because there's going to be more wrappers being produced. But you might see that the software starts to vary between schemes more. And if you think about it, it's because more technology is coming in as well. So as more technology comes through, some schemes might have that. I'm trying to think of floor plan integration's the obvious one. You'll start to see floor plan integration across a lot of the schemes now. Some will have that, some won't. So if you keep moving forward, what if you're going to put a camera in that property that scans the room, does all the geometry, and then passes that information across? So I think there's going to be lots of different ways going forward. How the individual assessor sort of like, works with that is going to be a challenge for the future, I think. So the mobile devices are coming forward. You can start to see LiDAR in Apple's mobile devices. So will some software have LiDAR, some won't have LiDAR? I think, again, that's where I sort of see it, some of the complications coming. But yeah, as far as sort of ECAS as a service, hopefully we as a scheme will push that behind for you. You won't really see it. You will see some software, log on, upload your photos, get all the auditing in the usual way, and then lodge to the government register. Does that cover more or less what you're asking?
Yeah, brilliant. One of the things, so one of the things that you've taken out of that, and John, perhaps you can jump in on this as well, was that obviously softwares and UIs might be slightly different depending on the wrappers which are being produced. We've had a couple of questions which have come in, so I'll ask a couple of the questions. There was a question on, is a version of HEM going to replace RDSAP? So obviously there was speak of an EPC wrapper, and then there was also questions on whether there is any idea on what metric or wrapper MEES will focus on. Do we have any more information on that at this moment in time, or are we still waiting on EPC reform and the like?
I'm not aware of any thing regarding MEES relating to HEM, so that's probably a later phase. Phase 1 of the HEM rollout is going to be new build, so approved document Part L and Section 6 in Scotland. But I know they are already working on kind of the next phase, which will be the EPC wrapper. And then I know David hates this RD HEM wrapper, whatever it's going to be called, but the HEM wrapper for existing buildings. So yes, there will be a version of HEM which will replace RD SAP. Timescale could be interesting, because I know the Scottish government has suggested quite some optimistic times for swapping over, and I believe they're going to have a kind of a Scottish RD HEM wrapper in themselves. But I don't think we've had any timeframes confirmed for England. Well, we've not, have we? Because we've not had any timeframes confirmed for Future Home Standard either. That's, anyway, I'll wind myself up if I start to keep talking about that.
I know.
If I can just,
Go on.
sorry, I was just going to say, just in terms of ECAS and saying that the assessors themselves won't need to worry about that. The one thing that will be noticeable when you're doing your assessment is when you press your result button, because at the moment you press your result button, you get your answer. With HEM, because you're having to ping the government server and it's having to run 17,000 iterations, you're going to press your button and then you're going to have to wait 5-10 seconds to get your result. Which when you're playing around with the new build and trying to get things to pass, it's going to be slightly annoying.
Brilliant. David, I'll let you jump on, because I know that you've got some stuff on rollouts and stuff like that. So if you carry on now, and then we'll come back to some questions shortly.
Yeah, sure. So let's move on to existing builds. We've been preempted, and let me get on my soapbox. Time for a rant. So,
sorry, David.
This has been my bugbear for months now. People saying RD HEM, and you can't necessarily blame them. People have been informally calling the process for existing build RD HEM because they're so used to RD SAP. But I think if we start using RD HEM, we're liable to get some of the similar issues that we face with RD SAP assessments. There is a perception that because it's got reduced in the title, in some way it's a lesser form of the calculation, even though it's just the data collection side of it that has been simplified. One of the reasons they chose to move away from SAP 11 to the home energy model was to clear the legacy misconceptions around the methodology. By using RD HEM, we're setting ourselves up to re-engage some of those misconceptions. So when RD SAP 10 was introduced, we closed the gap between SAP and RD SAP. All of our RD SAP 10 calculations go through our approved SAP 10 calculation engine. We upscale the RD SAP 10 data to a full SAP profile, and we run an identical calculation. HEM itself is always a full data set. It's just the pre-processing that's differently. So by calling it RD HEM, my fear is that you're going to see people have this misconception that it's not going to be as good. DESNZ have been using HEM for existing homes. We've been using existing build wrapper internally, although at the last meeting they did say that it's not quite a wrapper, so it's a pre-process. But if there's anything that we can take away from this roundtable, is that we should absolutely, under no circumstances, call it RD HEM. So that's my soapbox, but let's actually deal with what it does. It is likely to be very similar to what existing build assessments currently deal with. So we first collect our geometry, which can be either inputted manually, or they are looking at how, as Chris has said, LiDAR is used for the scanning of geometry and dimensions, or floor plan scanning to create the shape of our model. We'll then have U values being applied to those elements. So the first point is, if you have that elemental U value, you can input it if it's known. Otherwise, it's derived from the construction and age of the property. There have been lots of talk about how we to make the U value calculation much more transparent, rather than having various different tables of U values, making it all down to a formula. Which is something that they've been discussing. Then we have ventilation and air infiltration. Again, following on from RD SAP 10, inputting test data if we have it for pressure tests, or then defining our ventilation parameters in terms of open chimneys, the type of mechanical ventilation system that's present, and then going on to our space and water heating systems, the controls, and then other services within the wrapper. Within the property rather. All that data then goes into the wrapper itself, which builds the occupancy assumptions. RDSAP obviously used like 9 hours of heating a day. Well, SAP actually used 9 hours of heating a day, and trying to maintain a 21-degree internal temperature across the year. Those assumptions go into HEM core, and from there, instead of coming back to the wrapper, it goes to the EPC wrapper, and that's the part that is going to create the new metrics that had been proposed for the EPC reform. If we missed the EPC reform consultation for England and Wales in any part, it is due for a response, along with everything else in the early part of 2026. So there were proposals to have 4 headline metrics and 2 secondary metrics to replace our current SAP rating, our energy efficiency rating. There was fabric efficiency, heating system, smart readiness, energy cost, and then energy use and carbon emissions to supplement them. Just to finish off the comment about MEES that someone said, the MEES consultation was looking to heavily focus on fabric efficiency as a primary route for compliance, with one of the other metrics being used. I think it was cost and smart readiness. Readiness in itself isn't necessarily smart technology like lights that turn on or smart meters, well, not necessarily smart meters, but it's the ability for the property to adapt its energy consumption. So whether that be adaptive tariffs, renewable storage, heat batteries, things like that. So it's not necessarily smart tech like TRVs or a Hive, but it's other technologies that can balance out the energy use and flatten the high usage. We have already had a consultation response for EPC reform in Scotland. So instead of fabric efficiency, they've lumped for heat retention as a primary metric. Heating system as well, energy cost, which is very similar to our current SAP rating, and then energy use and carbon as secondary metrics. They also updated their consultation response in October to flesh out these metrics and to give more details on the bandings behind them. So it will be interesting to see how they will be comparable against England, Wales, and I'd assume Northern Ireland coming into those. Billy.
Fantastic. So thanks for doing those. We've had lots of questions come through. One of them which I wanted to start with was, I know you've got a little bit on transitions coming up, David, but one of the ones which come through quite a lot is, when is the planned date for changeover to HEM? Now, John touched on it a little bit on not having a lot of information yet, but could you just confirm for the audience here on if we have any of that information, or if we're sitting on our hands waiting?
I'll skip forward. I'll skip forward to this section on transition. So, as we have said, the if we look first at FHS, so the Future Home Standard, which will be the primary implementation of the home energy model, the consultation response was originally autumn. That has slipped to early 2026. On slides that we've seen in meetings, they have said that additional wrappers will be 6 months to a year after that initial FHS implementation. So for the EPC wrapper and existing build process, it would likely be late 2026, early 27 that we actually see something in practice. As to whether it will hit that, we wait to see. There was something on there about SAP 10.3, but I don't want to mention that just yet. Any other questions on EPC?
Yeah, so One of the questions, and perhaps this is for John, will FHS go ahead before HEM comes into play? This was asked in the chat.
I think that kind of links back to 10.3, so I may divert that one back to Billy. Sorry, back to David.
Okay, we'll go back to this slide. Okay, so yes, the government has foreseen that there would likely be delays in the implementation of HEM and HEM FHS. It is a seismic change to the industry. It requires upskilling of assessors, new software, training, conventions. Everything needs to fit into place for HEM FHS to be successful. With that in mind, the government in the summer came to the accreditation schemes and people who'd already written SAP software and presented SAP 10.3. So a new version of SAP that would only focus on the future home standard. It would include the FHS notional dwelling and provide a transition to allow for compliance calculations to be completed while HEM FHS was still in development or whatever. So we received approval for our SAP 10.3 compliance engine a couple of weeks ago. We're currently rolling it out to Energy Design Tools and JPA Technical, our software partners for on construction for SAP. Once the FHS statutory instrument, the legislation that finally puts FHS onto the books, goes into operation, then our SAP 10.3 solution will be immediately ready to go and fill in that lag time between before HEM FHS and the EPC wrapper is produced. There is currently no plans for SAP 10.3 to lodge. We don't anticipate there'll be any lodgements out of them. We haven't designed it to produce the new metrics. It will purely be for compliance purposes.
And in terms of a transition period for for people on the call, do we have a time frame on how long that dual rollout of SAP 10.3 and HEM may last? And then another question, I think this is a really good question for everybody on the call, is whether you agree with the temporary use of 10.3, or do you think that it confuses the transition of regulations? That was a question which come in.
As for how long 10.3 will last, I believe I can't give anything for certain because we're not officially it's not officially been approved, so everything is kind of in limbo. But it wouldn't, if it went into double figures in terms of months, it wouldn't be massive. Ideally, this is to allow continuity for calculations, and once a full complement of HEM FHS software is available, then we can start clearing out SAP 10.3. I say it's not going to lodge an EPC, so even if you build something really quickly, you're then going to have to use the EPC wrapper or rather FHS software to then generate an EPC out the back of it. So its lifespan is quite limited. In terms of whether it muddies the water, John, what do you think? Because you've been vocal about this on LinkedIn.
For any OCDAs on the call, we've got some short memories back to when SAP 10 was rolled out and the chaos that ensued afterwards, because the regulations set a date for SAP 10. SAP 10 wasn't ready for whatever reason. Let's not point fingers today. But there were months where we couldn't get a proper assessment out of SAP, which was affecting design stage compliance reports. I'm hoping that that's the reason why the government has looked at what's happening with the rollout of HEM and said, yeah, we need a plan B. We need to have this temporary patch where we can use something familiar. I understand that SAP 10.2, there won't be any new inputs, that it'll be totally familiar for assessors, just different results at the end of it. So we don't need to do any or very minimal upskilling, don't need to do any significant training. So I can see why that would be very useful, because moving over to HEM, there is going to be a lot more training required. And the other thing with HEM, it's not just about making sure the assessors are trained up on it, but it's around the conventions, it's around the actual physical reports that HEM is able to produce. These things are still in the very early days of development, from what I understand. So I'd be very surprised if, when HEM is rolled out from day one, that I'd be very surprised if we have a full set of conventions in place. And consistency between assessors, or having some kind of guidebook on how to use HEM correctly, we need that kind of stuff in place. Otherwise, HEM's just going to get a really bad reputation for being like for not delivering, basically, isn't it? So
I think
that
I think, John, you've made a very good point there, and probably the biggest question on our list of Q&As here is on training itself, or upskilling, and this is one for all of you on here. But do we know at the moment whether there'll be what level of training will be required? And if we don't know, which I believe is the case, then what do you believe should be the appropriate level of training or upskilling for moving to HEM?
I'd rather the accreditation scheme answered that one.
David and Chris.
All the politicians are.
So before you do that, I can jump in a little bit. So I've sat in meetings. Currently, there are meetings happening on a weekly basis at the moment for changes to the National Occupational Standard for domestic energy assessors. It's one movement in a way forward of updating how the requirements for an energy assessor and the occupational standards for an energy assessor will be updated. On top of that, we've also been requested by government to give our thoughts on what we should do for from a training perspective. My personal opinion is that we probably need some kind of upskill. I think there are probably too many intricate changes to allow for there not to be an upskill, and for assessors to transition from one to the other, or even new assessors who haven't been involved in SAP previously, how best to go about them. So I believe that we should probably go for some sort of upskill like the one that we saw in 2012, but I'll ask Chris and David for their opinions on that.
Yeah. Do you want to go first, David, or shall I jump in?
I'm gonna throw in the grenade. I think there should be mandatory upskill, requalification, because this is a massive change. We've already seen that the change just going up to RDSAP 10 was a fairly big step for some people, and we've been, I mean, I listen across the office to the Quidos technical support team, so I can hear that some of these things haven't landed as easily as they could have done. Roof rooms, good lord! If only we'd known 18 months ago how badly that was going to go down. But I think this change, even though the data inputs are going to be fairly similar, I think because of how the output will be different and how assessors will need to interpret that for homeowners, for building owners, I think it probably needs something quite substantial. And with all of the sort of negative press attention that's been happening about assessments, I know I'm probably just focusing on existing build at the moment. I think it would probably be in the best interest if we came out and said, look, we're at this new point, everyone is being trained up to do this. If they're not trained up to do this, then they won't be doing this. So I think we have to come out a little bit all guns blazing, new slate, new set of qualifications, or upskilled in exactly the same way that happened at the end when 992 came in. So that's my opinion.
Wow, that's pretty good. I'll just say two things. First thing, on the timescales, you'll notice we sort of beating around the bush a lot. That's because from the DLUC and DESNA's side, for basically all of government, they're not giving anything away at the moment. And even when they give us anything away, we're not allowed to tell you. So they're keeping their cards very close to their chest. I mean, it's unusual in that we have approved SAP 10.3 software that we're not allowed to release because it's got the new national dwelling defaults in there, and the government still want to keep those to their chest. So no one's releasing that software at the moment. So it's all being kept very close to the chest. I think it's a huge sort of like project they're putting together, and they really don't want to mess it up. So you can see it, this sort of slow down. Initially it was all guns blazing for FHS, now it's slowing down, and they just want to get it right. So that's where I'd say timescales. So if you think we're not sure, it's because we don't know, honestly don't know. So it's almost as your guess is as good as ours. I'd hope once the consultations, sort of the FHS consultation response comes out, we'll start to see some more things in early 2026. With regards again, oh sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to lead on from that question, because it revolves around training of sorts. But somebody asked the questions based on the requirements for additional data collection, and some of the other bits in HEM. Will site visits become compulsory for new builds? I know some of that changed a few years back now, but will they become compulsory at every visit? Do we know that? Does anyone want to take an answer to that?
I can see them becoming compulsory. I think the pressure is on, not just from new build, but from retrofit. The pressure's on with retrofit because you'll all seen in the news recently, the issues around there. Whether it makes a difference, I don't know, but I think they'll have political pressure to say, right, every house has to have a site visit. Someone has to sign it off, and that person who signs it off will carry the can if it's later found to be at fault. I think that's what they want to do. John, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, well, from the assessor side, dealing with new builds, obviously I don't want to be visiting every site that I'm assessing. I'm quite happy with the photo evidence side of things that was brought into the most recent Part L. I'd like that to be rewritten to make the definitions more sensible. But I really feel like if you've got all the photos to back up what you've put into your SAP or HEM model, and if you've got your building control actually inspecting the building, those two things should be working hand in hand, which shouldn't mean that I would then have to go and visit a site.
Fab. All right, so let's look at some more technical questions which have come in. Somebody has asked the question on will there be the possibility of the HTC, the heat transfer coefficient results being entered? If they consider fabric performance for MEES in the future, it would be beneficial to include actual measurements. The difficulty in existing buildings is proving the current insulation levels, for example, IWI. Anyone want to take that one on?
I think the initial answer was no, wasn't it, David?
Yeah,
I don't know the reason.
HEM will output a HTC, but the heat loss calculation is vastly different to how SAP does the calculation, so cannot assimilate a current calculated HTC value. And there was I'm not sure if it was a meeting or consultation response, because there was a discussion about SMETA's data being used, and it very clearly said that there'll be no way to have this come back in. They've spoken about using smart meter data, but not SMETA data. If anyone knows, SMETAs is a way of using smart meter data and other inputs to be able to calculate heat transfer coefficient. So yeah, it's one of those bizarre things where BS 40104 is now sort of saying collect the HTC, get the HTC value, but we then have a value that we can't actually use anywhere. So it would be interesting to see for a retrofit purpose whether RDSAP in some way actually sticks around as it's a method to utilize a HTC, even if we even if you follow a 10.3 route and make, instead of doing a retrofit wrapper for HEM, whether SAP still hangs around by its very old and decrepit nail fingertips on that one. So yeah.
And what about off of the back of that, obviously getting more information obviously should make it more accurate. But what about stuff like new technologies? So obviously with the introduction of RDSAP 10, you had the ability to put in mechanical ventilation from the database. Do we know yet how mechanical ventilation will be dealt with in HEM? That was a question which has come in from the chat as well.
Based on the existing build wrapper that I have seen, it's open source. There will be links on the next slide where you can go and look at the repositories, and yes, even though it's called RDHEM, you'll be able to see the code that's there. Even if you just look through it, you'll be able to see that the parameters that are currently in RDSAP 10 are available in this existing build process. So they'll be directly comparable. What the database does will be slightly different, but they should be very, very similar, is what I will say.
Yeah, so there was, you mentioned the PCDB, PCDF. There was a couple of questions on that. What will happen to the PCDF? Will heat network data get transferred from it to the new engine or wrappers, or will that calculation have to be redone from scratch? And then on the side of a side question to that was, in terms of heat pumps specifically, will there be accurate updates to the COP and the EER within the PCDF? Do we know any more on the PCDF yet, David?
So when I said that there was an open tender for everything to do with energy calculations, one of the lots of that was for innovative technologies and product recognition. So we know that there will be a brand new database. It will have much more data in it than the current PCDB. So it will, the current database only shows a very small snippet of what actually gets provided by manufacturers to BRE for inclusion in the PCDB. So this update will include a lot more. It will also be an as live database as well. So we won't have to wait for monthly updates for new products to hit it. So as long as the manufacturer gets approved, it will go straight in and will be selectable by the software. As to how efficiencies get calculated, as I say, the complexities of that are in much more than SAP currently deals with, where it actually uses a seasonal performance factor rather than a strict COP, but it will be able to handle. It's built specifically for heat pumps, so the calculation of their efficiencies will be much better tailored. And with the half-hour calculation iteration, we'll see things like how it cycles when it's on and off being able to be handled much better. So we should be able to see a much clearer picture. BRE have already been out to anyone who submitted data for the current database to go forward to the new version. Everything needs to be linked up, obviously. So when that process comes out, then it will all be part of HEM completely. Was that all
Brilliant.
of the question?
If I can I just add a line onto that to say that
Yeah.
with the new databases, we're also being promised that we're going to have the new technologies which SAP just doesn't comprehend. So things like thermal batteries, things like exhaust air heat pumps. I know you don't see those every day, but if you're trying to put one of those into SAP, you are basically just crowbarring it into the nearest available fit. Whereas HEM is going to be designed for new technologies so that you can input those. And although HEM is doing far more complex things, for us as assessors, we should still at the end of the day just be typing in a 6-digit number to get the correct product out of the database, and then HEM will deal with the legwork for us. That's the theory anyway.
think the only part of that, and this is something I think all of us as schemes are picking up through Pepper, is the fact that we do need an offline version or some way to go around the house. Is because obviously you're going to have mostly mobile software now. Certainly as we move forward, it will become more and more mobile based. And we need to be able to sort of select those products offline and ideally calculate offline, semi-offline as well. As you can see, a lot of this new technology, it is sort of pushing it into online only. So we've got to make sure that we have offline solutions for everyone, so they can be offline, collect all the data, and even if the last bit's to calculate, well, they can calculate. So some of the things for the new PCDB are great to have. Let's say a boiler that's been approved today goes in the database, but if you think about syncing between mobile devices, there's certainly some challenges there.
And John, you mentioned obviously with the calculating, it could be potentially 5 or 10 seconds for a calculation to get those results. Somebody asked the question on if you were working on, let's say, a block of flats for 90 flats as an example, is that 5 to 10 seconds for each flat, or is that 5 to 10 seconds for the 90 flats in total?
I think that will depend on how the software is designed and how the interface is pinging ECAS, and whether it pings and waits, whether it can just ping all 90 in one go. I believe ECAS can handle multiple pings at the same time. I don't know if every assessor in the UK pinged at exactly the same time, how slow it would be.
It's a fair
it's
comment.
It's a good test, isn't it? Let's do that.
Yeah. I mean, it should be worth giving some credit to the ECAS team at MHCLG. When the test version of FHS was available, it was running on the old Python code, and it took 2 minutes, give or take, John, to run a calculation.
Oh, I had one going at 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Well, there we are.
I may have had something wrong with it, but
it took a substantial amount of time. And what the ECAS team have done is rewritten the Python code base into a programming language that's much faster at doing calculations, and we're able to get a 2-minute calculation down to sub-second calculation. So they've done an awful lot of work to ensure that any delay in calculation or the length of calculation is as minimal as possible. So I don't want to say the only silver lining is it could have been worse, but it absolutely could have been a lot worse. So we should all be thankful for that, and well done to the ECAS team.
Brilliant. Is an interesting question because again they're talking about HEM being more in depth than other data points which may or may not be able to be input. There was a question on why don't we use something like the NCM behind SBEM, as it already has all this stuff, just add a domestic data option. Would that be appropriate for HEM, or is that completely off the cards? Is what HEM is proposing as an alternative a better solution?
It's one at you, John.
Yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't. Well, one thing I've noticed with looking into HEM is that it's made up of all kinds of different ISO numbers and BS numbers and existing reports and evidence-based documentation. HEM is just bringing all those bits together, which I think in some degree is what the NCM database does in SBEM. It's not just one thing. It's pulling together bits from different areas. Whether we could use MCM for producing stuff, I don't know. But I'm sure somebody a couple of years ago thought about it and thought, no, we need a home energy model. I'm sure somebody's already looked at it and made the decision that no, we need to take this approach.
Fab. And just whilst we were obviously talking about non-domestic, you do zonings. John confirmed earlier that it was a single zone. One of our attendees asked, is that a single heating zone or a single zone for the whole property?
Oh, I was referring to a single modelling zone. So if you've got different types of heating going on in the building, you can add as many heating systems as you like, or as many different types of emitters as you like. So you can put underfloor and radiators and fan coils all into the same modelled zone.
Brilliant. Okay, some more questions, and this is it's slightly away from the from HEM, but there was a question on should they use HEM as the basis of the creation of building passports? Does anybody have any thoughts on that, on a building passport in general?
Yes, I mean, I like the idea of a building passport. I know it's kind of, we kind of got it there with London, haven't we, with the Building Safety Act on high rise to really document everything, have the golden thread running through. I, I can see HEM having a lot of potential in that area, because I know today we're just talking about it as a replacement to SAP, but in the future you could take your HEM model and use it for ADO compliance for overheating, or you could use a heating engineer could take a HEM model and use that to measure heating loads and demands. So the potential for using HEM for a multi-purpose tool is really interesting to explore, and the building passport kind of fits nicely into that, to have a single HEM model to get 10 or 20 different answers out of, depending on what you're asking.
I'd agree.
I suppose that's where the use of the sort of the wrapper based solution that they've come out with is going to be advantageous. So instead of just focusing on new build compliance or existing build, you can change those assumptions and have actual occupancy data, so that we have a proper domestic operational rating, rather than just relying on the heating assumptions that are built into the existing build. As I say, there could be retrofit wrappers in the future, so overheating wrappers. There is scope and potential to expand, and that's when we had original meetings about this. This is something that the government wanted. They wanted lots of wrappers and uses to feed into this this core calculation, and hopefully that's something that we'll see picking up traction as we move on with HEM's life cycle.
I think you mentioned a good point there, David, on you mentioned a potential retrofit wrapper, and a wrapper that you'd like to see. There was a question here on how it will work with retrofit assessments. I presume the answer at the moment is we don't know yet, but we'd like to see a wrapper for that level.
I'm sure it'll work very well with retrofit. As I say, the only thing that kind of possibly holds it back is the lack of HTC integration. It seems pretty pointless collecting a value from BS 40104, which will likely be widespread use into as 2035. So yeah, collecting a value that you've got no use for and can do nothing with, hopefully we can find some way to utilize it, and a retrofit wrapper would be that.
I appreciate we were using HTC as the acronym. We've had a couple of questions on if you could explain what HTC is, please, David.
It's the heat transfer coefficient. So it's a function of the heat loss from the property. So the way that SAP calculates it, it's the sum of the heat losses from the ventilation and the sum of the heat losses from the fabric. So and then if you divide it by the total floor area of the property, you get a heat loss parameter. So that gives you it basically flattens out your heat losses against the size of your property. So it's a good measure of how much heat you're losing per square meter.
It's a really useful tool in the new build market to understand why properties may be losing more heat loss than they were designed for. Commonly when the answer is it's a bedroom over the garage and they've forgotten to put the insulation in the garage ceiling, that HTC can give us that answer without us having to rip the ceiling out to check.
Yeah, brilliant. And okay, I've got one more technical question, and then there's a couple of others as well just before we finish. Some of the technical questions was obviously there were FHS. We've already stated places a greater emphasis on accuracy, and one of the things which has come up in these questions is a rumor of there being a lot more information required for the surroundings of a property. Is anyone able to give any more information on surroundings and external factors within HEM?
Like I can for new build. I don't
Yep.
know if I don't know what's in the existing buildings wrapper, but yeah, for new build, currently in SAP you've got your sheltered side button, which is a mark between 0 and 4, depending on how many buildings are around you. Whereas the proposal for HEM is that you have to enter each surrounding obstacle. So if you're building a house on a housing estate, you've got houses all around you. For each of those buildings, you need to measure how far away it is from the house and how tall it is. If you think back to the Code for Sustainable Homes HEA1 calculator, it's basically that, which is, I suppose, if you're just in one plot, then it's you're just looking at your site plan, and it's only going to take you a few minutes more. But when you're looking at a site plan of 200, your option to just duplicate a similar house type goes out the window, because you're having to measure obstacles for every single plot. So that it's one of the things I'm keeping an eye on to see what the final version of HEM looks like in that regard, because that could well be a bit of a time-consuming addition for us.
Yeah, it's also for windows, isn't it, John? Obstruction towards the glazing.
Yes, it's looking at the impacts on solar impact for glazing, and also shelter and exposure rates for the elements.
Yeah,
I believe.
And to cover it off for existing builds, again, from what I've seen in the wrapper work, you basically would, if you think of north as 0 degrees, you give the obstructions in the first 45 degrees, the next 45 degrees, all the way around the perimeter of the property, from what I can see. So this is another area where possibly technology could take over and collect that information. If you stand with your back to the front door, or standing forward from the front door, pan around, LiDAR or some other remote sensing technology takes over, and you're able to determine those obstructions in the perimeter.
Brilliant. And then I have one last question, and then we'll get some closing comments. But John, obviously you're somebody who's been involved in the testing of HEM and the ins and outs of FHS in general, and you already know SAP new builds inside out. Obviously, you mentioned in your last comment that surroundings was something that you were keeping your eye on. Is there anything else that you're keeping your eye on which would be useful for the audience to know or understand?
Yeah, sure. Well, when I say I'm keeping my eye on, I'm saying that because I've seen the latest version of HEM, but the final version hasn't come out yet. So and same with the FHS wrapper as well. I'm looking at kind of the full question, the full question list in HEM, and the future HEM standard wrapper will be a simplified version of that. But within HEM, yeah, obstacles and surroundings is one area I'm keeping an eye on. Ventilation, not necessarily a ventilation system, but things like ducting, if you've got MVHR, or trickle vents or air bricks, things like that, which SAP doesn't currently measure, but HEM is asking those questions. That's just something I'm interested to see what the final version looks like. And pipe work as well as another thing which isn't in SAP, but if you're doing a full HEM assessment, then it wants to know the lengths of all your hot water pipe work, whether it's insulated. Same with the heating, if you've got radiators, all the total lengths connecting all your pipe work to all your radiators. I'm not saying that would be in the final future home standard wrapper. That hopefully that's going to get simplified. But yeah, those are the areas that I'm keeping my eye on, because it's so different to what we're used to. Let's say the majority of the questions when you look at HEM, yeah, it wants to know your U values, it wants to know your window sizes, your orientation. Yeah, there are some changes to some of those questions, but the majority of them would be familiar with. It's those categories like pipe work and ventilation and infiltration, which are a bit more of a brave new world.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to be finishing up right about now, so I'd just like to invite all of you to just have some your closing thoughts on HEM, what we should, how you feel about it, and perhaps just something which people can take away from HEM, from this session when it comes to HEM in the future. Let's start with David.
Oh God, you would come to me first. Yeah. This is, I mean, I'll use the phrase again. This is a nexus point. It's a line in the sand. Everything that we do from this point will be completely different, and it will be done with the best of intentions. It will be difficult. There will be struggles. But to be poetic, we'll all get there together. So that's my final thought.
Thank you. And John, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I know today we've spoken about a lot of what's going on in the background of HEM and how different it is, but I will reiterate that it comes down to the software that we will be using when this goes live, and the easier we can make those user interfaces, the less scary HEM will become, because yeah, we could kind of forget 95% of what we've spoken about today because the computers will do all that for us, you know. So I'm optimistic that the likes of David and the programmers and the people who can read Python, they're going to put all the legwork in, get all the maths out of it, and leaving us assessors to just enter areas and U values and keeping it as simple as we can, please.
Brilliant. And I think that palms nicely onto you, Chris, considering you're the CTO, and John's final comment was on software and UIs.
Yeah, that was beautiful segue straight into it. I think as a CTO, I think HEM is an exciting opportunity to sort of look at the new and greatest software. If you've got 4 times the existing inputs, if you'd instantly as an assessor go, well, that's going to take me 4 times as long, and therefore I'm going to have to charge 4 times the price. Originally it was RDSAP assessments were envisaged as a 40-minute non-invasive survey, so it's going to be our challenge to find software ways of reducing that time. And if you think about it, back in 2007, we were just starting on the sort of offline mobile journey. Now we've got Wi-Fi everywhere and we're far more connected up. I look at this and say, do we really need someone to plod around a building and take all of these dimensions again and again and again, very slow, very manual? Or can we pull data in? Can we pull data in from the last assessment? Can we use AI to match the windows up? Can we do all of that kind of pre-work so that you can, obviously at the moment, people are sort of doing shouldn't be doing, but are occasionally doing drive-by surveys, that kind of thing, using Google Street View, using Google Maps. Well, if it's out there, can we pull that in a structured way so that you won't fail audit and get struck off? Because all the data's out there. We've got OS places, we've got land registry becoming more online finally after a few decades of time, but we've got masses and masses of data now, and we've got super fast computers on our phones and tablets that can do a lot of processing. So if we can pull that in and pull all that data in, particularly from a previous assessment, that's where I feel we should be going.
Brilliant. And I think with that and everybody's final comments, it's time to shoot on. Just a reminder, this recording will be made available, and CPD certificates will be sent out over the next week or so as well. Just want to thank you all for attending. As we get more information, and there's bits which are confirmed after the consultation responses, then we will be doing more free sessions like this for everybody to jump on and make sure that you understand everything. So yeah, once again, I'd just like to say thanks and enjoy the rest of your day/evening. Thanks to David, Chris, and John as well. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. Bye.